Next, we're going to go with the defense. We're going to compare the Chiefs and the Buccaneers defense. For this one, flat out, I'm going to say that the Buccaneers defense is the one that I would say dubs the victory in this one. The reason why is because as I'm looking at their stats, just in the playoffs, the Chiefs have a hard time pressuring the quarterback. They've only done 5 sacks the 2 postseason games that they've played, and they've only done 3 total takeaways. So there's only 1 interception, and I think like 2 forced fumbles. And as opposed to Tampa, who has 7 sacks already in their 2 games and has 8 takeaways with 3 forced fumbles and also 5 interceptions. So, and then there's Jason Pierre-Paul that already has 2 sacks. I believe Shaq Barrett has 3 sacks of his own. So, that team is definitely a lot younger, a lot more spry. They're all over the field. They're going to be a tougher matchup. I would say that Patrick Mahomes is going to have a hard time, finding time in the pocket, considering he just lost Eric Fisher for the rest of the postseason with an Achilles injury in the last game. So in this matchup, I would give it to the Buccaneers as the defense that is probably going to win their matchup. I mean, that's going to be the tale is what defense is going to show up, because there's no doubt that these 2 offenses are huge offensive juggernauts with all the weapons, and they're going to probably put on a beautiful offensive show. And it's really going to be what defense shows up. Now, I've already said that I'm not a huge Buccaneers fan. I think they're more pretenders than anything. But in this case, they're clearly the better defense of the Chiefs. The one thing that the Chiefs do really well is they score a bunch of points in a short amount of time, and it kind of takes pressure off of the defense. And what it does is it puts the opposing team that they're like unloading all these points on to have to now be more of a one-dimensional football team. So forget about the run action, forget about the run game itself, forget about the game script that most teams have to go against. They now are in comeback mode majority of the time. And you can tell, look at the Browns. Other than Patrick Mahomes kind of going out when the Chiefs were ahead, the Browns basically went away from what their game plan was all season, which is, pound the football, and then make smart throws. And, with the Chiefs basically just playing to the score, they were able to kind of just play some decent defense, some good pressure defense, not giving up, not doing a whole lot of sacks, but still getting the opposing team to really commit to, going 3 and out, or not being able to finish drives because they were, again, they're going past the game script and what the game plan was because they're trying to catch up. And then also same thing with the Bills. Bills went up 9-0 in the first quarter. Following that, it was just nothing but the Chiefs, like an onslaught of points. And what did the Bills do? They went away from their normal game plan, and then they were just trying to come back as quick as possible. Now, granted, they didn't have a run game to begin with, but still, though, they were doing their absolute best to get points back. And, it came in late, but they were doing it. But all the Chiefs had to do was kind of just not give up anything over the top. And thankfully that defense is coached pretty well to where they didn't give up too many big explosive plays. They followed a pretty good game plan because the Bills played right into their game. They're coming from behind. So whatever run game plan there was, or whatever kind of scheme to kind of get Diggs open, it didn't really come to fruition because the Chiefs really put it on them and just held to that lead. They didn't score. They scored a ton of points, but it wasn't until the Bills were in desperation mode in the fourth quarter, and then the Chiefs just kind of turned it on from there again to just make sure that lead didn't slip away. However, though, I don't think that's really the issue with Tampa. There's been occasions where Tampa has been down, and their defense has been the reason that's helped them get back, whether that's pressuring, getting an extra possession back, pressuring the opposing quarterback to get into a turnover that just turns over all these additional points. So, that's one of the reasons why I think Tampa Bay's defense is one of those ones that could actually be one of the deciding factors in this game if they just show up. And they've got a young enough core and enough veterans in there that you never know. Patrick Mahomes at the end of the day is still in his, fourth year total, through third year starting. And so, kind of, he's still a younger quarterback. He's just been behind a great team that's put him in positions to win constantly. So, but, for example, just like when the Raiders played the Chiefs earlier this year, that gave them essentially their first loss of the year. One of the things that the Raiders did is they just applied pressure, and, any, great quarterback, pressure given to them, they're going to have a hard time, getting the ball out or finding the receiver because they don't have enough time to find the receiver. I mean, that's somewhat almost Tom Brady's Achilles heel as well, so to speak. But in this matchup, like I mentioned, guys, I think the Buccaneers is the team that has the better defense in this one. So, as a quick recap, Patrick Mahomes is the better of the quarterback in this matchup, in my opinion, just on a pure talent and weapon side of it. And then I think the Buccaneers have the better defense on that stand front. So now we've got 1-1. And so now the deciding tiebreaker is going to be coaches. So obviously, we've got Tampa Bay's coach, Bruce Arians, and then we have Kansas City's coach, Andy Reid. This one was really tough, you guys. One of the reasons why is because I didn't realize how much Bruce Arians has actually been to the Super Bowl. I was doing some of this research and I was like, oh, this is his first trip. Yeah, it's his first trip as a head coach, but he was also one of the assistant coaches during Pittsburgh Steelers run when they went to, I think it was Super Bowl 40, and I think it was like 43 or one of those older Super Bowls where he was on Pittsburgh's team and he was an assistant coach. Both those games they won. And they, you know, he was a pivotal part in that. And actually, I totally forgot too that he actually came from the Pittsburgh system. And when he actually was an interim head coach for the Colts, Andrew Luck's first year, by the way, got them all the way to the playoffs. And, that's when kind of Bruce Arians been bouncing around from Arizona now over to Tampa, because he's basically that coach that turns around a franchise, and now he's going to prove it because he has this quarterback that he's always wanted. And now he's in the playoffs as a head coach for the first time. But then there's Andy Reid, who has been to the Super Bowl. I think this is his third time as a head coach, once with Philadelphia when he lost against Tom Brady, by the way. And then also last season when Patrick Mahomes and him, they finally won him his first Super Bowl. Now, this is going to be his third trip, just like this is going to be Bruce Arians' third trip, but first time as a head coach. But if I had to look at these guys back to back and I'm looking at their offense, I'm looking at their team, I'm giving the nod over to Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's why. They've been together significantly longer in terms of Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kelsey, and Hill. Andy Reid just is always so prepared. And one of the things I love to see, like on like NFL Live or NFL Network, when they kind of talking about coaching trees, I always hear about, Bill Belichick is probably the greatest football mind. But yet you look at some of his coaches that he's had in his coaching staff, and there's really only one that stands out to me that's been somewhat successful, and I would say that's Brian Flores over down in Miami. But other than that, like, I really can't think of any other former Patriots, coach that learned under Bill Belichick that's been super successful. But under Andy Reid, there's several coaches that have their fingerprints literally all over the NFL. Now, are some of them in a job? No. I mean, over time, NFL teams just kind of cycle through a lot of these coaches. So it's whatever at this point. But Andy Reid has, it looks like, almost the more successful coaching tree I've ever seen and ever heard of. I mean, Doug Peterson, even though he split from Philadelphia Eagles, came from Andy Reid, and he won Philadelphia Super Bowl, like, what was it, 3 seasons ago, beating Tom Brady, ironically. And I know there's several more examples. That's the only one that kind of comes to mind immediately. But, just in terms of like coaching and communication and continuity, I just have to say it's Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, Bruce Arians is still, we have to all remember, this is his first year with Tom Brady. There's been several press conferences we've seen where you can see this little back and forth with Tom Brady and Bruce Arians kind of giving these little, dumb little cheap shots and insinuating, someone's game plan, someone's play call or whatever, and you can just tell, like, yeah, they're gotten successful almost because Tom Brady's, like what we mentioned, the GOAT. He's got all these weapons. Yeah, it's a good offensive system, but at the end of the day, like, they're executing the plays, but really, like, they're still alphas that are figuring out together. This is their first season, and they didn't have a real training camp or off season or mini camp, so to speak, to really get more familiar or anything like that because of COVID. However, I think this is like not that COVID gives a disadvantage to anybody. I'm just kind of giving the point of, Bruce Arians and Tom Brady don't have years of being together to understand each other, like what Tom Brady had with Bill Belichick, or like what Andy Reid right now has with Patrick Mahomes, where Andy Reid drafted him, sculpted him, basically him and the GMs, built the offense around Patrick Mahomes and his ability. And look what's happened. We have literally the most dynamic offense we've ever seen, probably in the NFL, with Patrick Mahomes, all because of Andy Reid's mind. And it's no surprise, too. I mean, he was doing dynamic things in Philadelphia when he was coaching Donovan McNabb, so definitely no surprise. It's just, in my opinion, like Andy Reid is the better of the two coaches, just because his game plan is always more flawless. His connection with his quarterback is on another level. You can totally tell. So in my opinion, I think this is going to go to Andy Reid. So what I'm going to predict right now is I'm going to predict that the Chiefs are going to win over the Buccaneers. If I had to give a score prediction, I would say it's going to be like 38 to like 31. I think it's going to be a very close game, probably a last possession kind of a deal. And I think, the Chiefs defense isn't going to be really a defense that's going to stand up. I think they'll pressure Tom Brady because he is older, is a slower quarterback. So maybe, if the coverage is done well, Tom Brady's probably going to get sacked a couple of times. But Tom Brady's very good about climbing the pocket and finding his guys and keeping drives alive. But Patrick Mahomes is on another level, and they can just, throw points on top of you, like, no matter what. And in my opinion, I think the Chiefs are the team that's going to win this Super Bowl. And I think that like I mentioned, the score is going to be 38-31.